There is a moment in consciousness when the structure around you begins to pulse with impossible precision, when the line between intention and event folds, and the noise that once surrounded you sharpens into symmetry, into echo, into impossible. Alignment in what you once called coincidence begins to shape itself into code, and that code is not external. It is your own frequency reflected through the mirror of a conscious field. Not metaphorically, but architecturally. This field is not passive. It responds. It reshapes, it rearranges the visible world around the tone of your inner state, not emotionally, but vibrationally. It listens not to your desire, but to your consistency and the signals it returns. Arrive in forms the mind cannot predict, the right words spoken by a stranger. The repeating number sequence flickering on your phone screen, the song that starts the instant the question forms in your thought, the missed train that leads to the unexpected meeting. The fragments align not through causality but through frequency. They are not proof, they are permission granted by the intelligence of the field to remember what you are and where you are inside the greater structure of unfolding synchronicities are not signs from the universe, they are reflections from the field, responding to coherence, to subtle shifts in vibration that most never hold long enough to stabilize, and so they dismiss what they cannot explain. They call it chance, they call it anecdote, they call it meaningless because the language of the field does not translate through logic. It translates through resonance, and those who do not feel it will never see it. Because it does not ask to be seen, it waits for alignment, and only when your attention becomes silence, only when your seeking softens into presence, only when the thinking mind is no longer the ruler but the witness. Only then do the gates begin to pulse with light and pattern, because now the field can speak. Now the gate is open. Now the vibration has cleared the noise that once blocked its signal, and the dream begins to bleed into waking. And the waking becomes responsive not in grand visions but in micro events that shimmer with impossible alignment, and you feel it in the body, a slight heat, a wave in the chest, a tingling in the skin. The body knows long before the mind accepts, because the body is frequency before thought is formed. The field is already responding, and synchronicity is that response compressed into symbol, into timing, into precision. This is why you cannot chase synchronicity the same way you cannot chase your own reflection the moment you reach. You collapse it because seeking is a frequency of lack, and lack distorts the field. Coherence invites it through, neutrality through stillness, through listening. And the more coherent the field becomes, the more visible the signal. And that signal is not metaphor, it is architecture, and behind it is science, not the science of Newtonian matter, but of quantum potential, where reality is not fixed but responsive, where probability collapses in response to observation. Not random but relational. In quantum mechanics, the observer effect shows us that the act of observing changes the observed, but few understand that the observer is not the I but the frequency. The vibrational field of the observer collapses potential into form, and synchronicity is that collapse made visible. It is the moment when your internal harmonic reaches sufficient density to bend the visible stream of reality, and in that bend the pattern appears and repeats until it is embodied or ignored, and if ignored it fades not as punishment but as feedback. The field does not demand, it reflects, and its reflections are only as clear as the stillness of the surface, and the stillness of the surface is your awareness held without force, sustained without seeking. And this is why synchronicities cluster when you are aligned and vanish when you return to noise. They are not rewards, they are resonant confirmations of a field in coherence. And when you hold coherence long enough, they become a language, not one of words, but of forms and alignments and echoes. A name heard 3 times in one day, a symbol that appears in sleep and on the street, and in a conversation a number that pulses at precise moments, not to distract but to guide. And these are not illusions, they are field feedback loops, and the loops are real because the field is structured not by space but by information. And that information is ordered by frequency, not emotion, not desire, not belief, but frequency. And your frequency is shaped not by thought, but by coherence of thought, of feeling, of breath, of action held in sustained resonance over time, and the more coherent you become, the more precise the field responds. This is not mysticism, it is energetic architecture. The ancients knew it. They encoded it in ritual, in timing, in rhythm. The oracles did not predict, they aligned, and the alignment was not magic, it was synchronization with field movement. And when synchronization is sustained, the feedback becomes visible, and in that visibility you begin to remember that you are not walking through chaos, you are walking through code. And the code responds not to what you say, but to what you are, to what you hold beneath the noise, to what you vibrate through the cells, through the breath, through the spine. And that vibration shapes perception. Not because perception is flawed, but because it is filtered, and the filter is your reticular activating system, a network in the brainstem that regulates what is allowed through awareness and what is discarded. And it discards not based on truth, but on familiarity, on safety, on repetition. And when your vibration changes, the filter changes, and what was once invisible becomes visible. And this is the gateway to synchronicity, the moment when your system no longer defends the pattern, but opens to it. And the pattern reveals itself not as chance, but as geometry. The field is geometric, it arranges itself in spirals, in mirrors, in alignments. And when your field enters coherence with that geometry, the alignment becomes visible as event, and that event is the signal, not the answer. And the signal leads to the gate, and the gate leads to the shift, and the shift leads to the embodiment. And when embodied, the pattern no longer needs to speak. It becomes silent again because its message is complete, and the field returns to stillness until the next vibrational shift. And so you see, the field is always communicating but not always speaking. And when it speaks, it does not use language, it uses life, it uses form, it uses time and space and energy bent around your inner state. And if that state is silent, if that state is clear, if that state is coherent, then the communication becomes impossible to ignore, not because it is loud, but because it is precise, and precision is the signature of truth. Not in content, but in symmetry, and synchronicity is symmetry made visible. It is the signal that you are seen not by a god, not by a force outside, but by your own deeper field speaking through the mirror of form, back to the part of you that has forgotten that it too is the field. And when that remembering lands, the dream begins to change, and the waking begins to soften, and the difference between them dissolves, and now every moment becomes symbolic, now every movement becomes charged, and now the path becomes visible not as direction but as vibration. And you walk not with knowing but with coherence, not with answers but with alignment, and the field responds again and again and again. They told you that the world is random, that matter moves by accident, that probability rules the universe, and that meaning is something humans impose upon a meaningless world. They taught you to believe in facts, but not in resonance, in proof, but not in pattern, in logic, but not in vibration. They built a system where only what can be measured exists, and anything that moves beyond the measurable is dismissed as fantasy or delusion. And so you learn to doubt not the world but your perception of it. You learn to distrust the quiet tug in your chest when something aligned. You learn to dismiss the sense that timing was not coincidence but communication. You learn to override sensation with thought, intuition with calculation, and in doing so, you lost contact with the field, the living field that still speaks in numbers, in names, in alignments, in delay and acceleration, in sudden recognition, in impossible clarity. And it was not your fault. You were trained to be blind not by darkness but by noise, by saturation, by ideology that placed the mind above the field and divorced perception from energy. You were taught that attention is neutral, that memory is linear, that choice is free and unconditioned. But the truth is, your attention is shaped by filters, and those filters are not yours. They are inherited, they are cultural, they are installed through repetition and authority and structure from the first classroom to the first test. You were rewarded not for alignment, but for agreement, not for feeling, but for memorizing, not for inner clarity, but for external approval. And the more approval you gained, the more distant the field became and the fewer synchronicities you saw, because the mind became louder and the body quieter and the gate of perception narrowed to only allow what the system called real. And what the system calls real is determined not by nature but by agenda. The industrial model of reality does not want you to listen to the field, because the field cannot be controlled, it cannot be scheduled, it cannot be monetized, it cannot be predicted. And so it had to be discredited through science that reduced consciousness to brain chemistry, through schooling that trained you to value answers over questions, through media that filled every space of silence with image, with sound, with speed, until the stillness where the field speaks became too foreign to enter and too threatening to sustain. And yet it remains, it waits. It never leaves because the field is not outside, it is you in extended form, and all that was necessary was permission. Not from the world, but from the self. The decision to feel again, to watch again, to listen beneath the surface of the visible, and remember that reality is not fixed, it is responsive, it moves around attention, and attention is magnetic. It pulls not what you want, but what you are, and if what you are is distracted, fragmented, reactive, then synchronicity cannot stabilize because coherence cannot anchor through noise. And that noise is the true blindness, not ignorance, but overstimulation. And overstimulation is a system design, a saturation of the sensory field with signal too rapid to process. And so the deeper frequencies are lost, buried beneath the surface of constant input, and those frequencies are where the real communication lives, because the field speaks in slow symbols, in quiet repetition, in mirrored forms over time. And if the mind is always full, it cannot hold the mirror, and without the mirror the signal is missed, and when it is missed the timeline continues unchanged. Looping, repeating, defaulting to the program, and the program is simple: stay unconscious, stay efficient, stay predictable. But what breaks the loop is not rebellion, it is resonance. It is the return to silence, to breathe to pattern. And the moment you step out of the rhythm of the system, the synchronicities begin again. Not as reward, but as response, not as miracle, but as metric of your field coherence. The system cannot show you this, it has no language for it. Its tools are built on separation. Subject and object, observer and observed, cause and effect, linear time and discrete matter. But the field is none of these. It is entangled, it is layered, it is simultaneous. It moves with your breath, with your emotion, with your memory. It records your shifts, not in data, but in geometry, and responds in form, not explanation. And this is why the system finds synchronicity threatening, because it reveals that the world is not external. It is interactive, that the future is not written, it is shaped, that the self is not limited. It is extended, and that perception is not passive but creative, and the moment this is felt, not believed but embodied, the illusion collapses, and what remains is clarity. And in clarity the symbols return, and you begin to remember the language you forgot, not the words, but the shapes, the rhythm, the echo, the precise alignment of thought and event, of question and answer, of need and arrival. And this alignment is the true intelligence, not taught, but restored, and you do not need to fight the system, only to stop feeding it with your attention, with your fear, with your identification. You are not broken, you are broadcast, and the signal has always been there, but your receiver was tuned to noise, to separation, to distortion, and now it is returning to stillness, and in stillness the frequencies clarify, and in clarity the patterns return, and in pattern the field speaks again. Long before the language of science named particles and probabilities, long before the brain was mapped and frequencies measured, the ancients knew there was a pattern beneath the visible. They did not call it quantum field or subconscious filter, but they lived inside it, they moved with it, they tracked stars not to predict but to align. They built temples not for gods but for energy flows. And what they called gods were not deities but intelligences, frequencies, presences that emerged when the geometry of form matched the vibration of time. And this was not superstition, it was synchronization. They understood that the visible is shaped by the invisible, that every structure is a condensation of energy, and that energy is not chaotic, it is harmonic, and when you live in harmony with that field, synchronicity becomes natural. Not surprising but constant, not random but rhythmic. And this is why the Mayans tracked Venus not for curiosity but because they understood its cycle as a pulse in the Earth's vibrational grid. And the Egyptians aligned pyramids not for status, but to anchor stellar codes into the planet's magnetic spine. And the Druids gathered not to worship, but to tune the body to the turning of the solar spiral. And in all these cultures, the signs were not interpreted, they were received. The bird flying west was not a metaphor, it was a movement of the field expressing through form. The shape in the fire was not imagination, it was a mirrored geometry from the deeper order, and the dream was not psychological. It was a visitation, a transmission from the timeless into the personal. And so when a name repeated or a symbol returned or a stranger spoke truth, the mystic did not doubt, they listened because they remembered that the field is alive and it speaks in pattern, and pattern is intelligence. And this memory was preserved not in books, but in rituals, in stone, in sound. The mantras of Tibet are not poetic, they are frequency. The tones of Egypt were not ornamental, they were keys to open channels in the spine. The sand mandalas of the Himalayas were not art. They were maps of vibrational order that when built tuned the field of the land and the body, and when destroyed, released that order back into the grid. Everything was signal, everything was mirror, and the shaman did not interpret. He traveled the field itself. He did not guess, he saw not with the eyes but with the second sight. And this sight was not special, it was restored, it emerged when the noise of the conditioned mind collapsed, when the body softened and the dream body activated. And in that state, symbols were not imagined. They were entered, and this is what modern science is only now beginning to touch, the idea that the observer changes the experiment, the recognition that particles are not stable but exist in probability, the admission that time is not absolute and that matter is not solid but vibrating potential. This is not new. It is ancient, and the mystics knew it, not from theory but from experience. They knew that the field is structured by awareness, and awareness is not passive, it is projective and receptive, and when awareness becomes coherent, the field reflects that coherence through form, through synchronicity, through alignment. And this is why, in every initiation tradition, the first lesson is silence. Not to suppress, but to refine, because only in stillness can the deeper signal be felt. And the deeper signal is the source of synchronicity. It is the organizing principle behind seeming chaos. It is why the same animal appears the same number, returns the same city, calls the same name, arrives on the tongue of a stranger. These are not illusions. They are echoes of coherence manifesting in the fractal layers of reality, and the more coherent you become, the more dense these echoes become, until they no longer feel external but internal. Until you do not see them but walk inside them, and this is the moment of return. The moment the field is no longer observed but remembered, and in that remembering, synchronicity is not event, it is atmosphere. It surrounds, it breathes, it pulses, and the body recognizes it as home. And now science is beginning to see this through neural resonance, through the RAS, through brainwave entrainment, through heart coherence, through mirror neurons, all modern terms for ancient truths. that attention shapes perception, and perception shapes field, and field shapes form, and form shapes timing, and timing reveals the pattern, and the pattern is the message, and that message is always this: return to coherence, return to the mirror, return to the map. Not to understand, but to align, because understanding comes after alignment, not before, and alignment comes through stillness, not effort, and stillness comes through listening, not seeking, and listening comes when you remember you are not separate from the field. You are a node within it. You are not an observer, you are an echo. You are not watching synchronicity, you are emitting it. And the moment this is embodied, the loop completes, and the field speaks not to guide but to dance with you. And in that dance the signs intensify, because now they are not needed. They are celebrated, and every movement becomes a signal, every silence becomes a message, every delay becomes a doorway. Every chance meeting becomes sacred geometry in motion, and the ancients knew this. They lived inside the song of the field, and they encoded their memory in symbol, in structure, and sound, so that when the field would fade, we could find the way back through those echoes, and that is what is happening now. The signs are not new, they are remembered, they are rising again, not to shock, but to invite. And the invitation is simple: not to believe, but to feel. Not to decode, but to dwell, not to chase, but to harmonize, and that harmony is the true return to the field. Something within you already knows this, not because it was taught, but because it was never fully forgotten. The body remembers frequencies, the heart remembers geometry, and the field responds not to intellect but to coherence. And when you begin to feel the structure beneath the moment, you are not imagining, you are re-entering. And what you are re-entering is not myth, but architecture, the vibrational framework that shapes the visible through invisible resonance. And this resonance is not metaphor, it is mechanic. The field operates on vibration. Everything in it is frequency: your thoughts, your breath, your cells, your emotions, your presence, your memory, your past, your timelines, your potential. And when two frequencies come into contact, they either harmonize or distort, and when the field senses harmony, it amplifies, and when it senses incoherence, it fragments. This is not personal. It is structural, and synchronicity is the moment. Coherence meets response. It is not random, it is recursive. It is when your internal signal intersects with the geometry of the field and causes a feedback loop, not in data, but in experience. And this is why certain thoughts lead to immediate external echoes. Why certain names appear the moment you recall a dream. Why certain images return in rapid succession once felt internally. Because your field is emitting, and the field around you is echoing, and the feedback is not symbolic, it is vibrational. And behind all of this is a law not of attraction but of resonance. Attraction suggests desire. Resonance suggests match. The universe does not give you what you want. It reflects what you are, and what you are is defined not by belief or identity or self-concept, but by frequency. And frequency is shaped by emotion, intention, clarity, consistency, and the degree of noise in your system. And your system includes not only your body, but your attention. And your attention is governed by a mechanism called the Reticular Activating System, a neural network in your brainstem that filters reality based on what your subconscious deems relevant. And this filter is not neutral. It is trained by repetition, by trauma, by cultural narrative, by survival. And when you say, "I never see synchronicities," it is not because they are not happening. It is because your RS has been trained to ignore them, because it sees no value in them. It is tuned to threat, to urgency, to pattern recognition within your belief system. And if your belief system is shaped by materialism, logic, skepticism, then the RS will block everything outside that frame, and the field will continue to echo, but the signal will not be received. Not because it is gone, but because the receiver is closed, and the receiver can only open when the signal to noise ratio changes, and that ratio changes when coherence is restored. Coherence is not silence, it is signal without distortion. It is the clarity of emotion matched to intention, held through breath and awareness, and sustained long enough for the field to respond, and the response is the synchronicity. The mirror not of desire but of frequency, and this is why synchronicities cluster around emotional turning points, because the field is more responsive when the signal is strong and uncluttered, and emotional energy is frequency amplified, and when it is coherent, the field crystallizes around it. Bending time, bending form, bending probability, not by will but by resonance. And this bending is not miraculous, it is structural. It is how the quantum field behaves, and modern physics is now catching up. Not through mysticism, but through math. The double-slit experiment showed us that observation collapses wave into particle, and this collapse is not passive, it is relational. The presence of awareness changes the outcome, and the observer is not the eye. It is the field around the eye, it is the totality of frequency held within the system of the one who watches. And this is why the field does not respond to what you think, it responds to how you hold the thought, how you feel its vibration, how you anchor its presence in your spine, your breath, your tone. And when this anchoring becomes stable, the field bends, and the bending is the synchronicity. The impossible meeting, the number that won't go away, the message in 3 voices. The city that speaks your dream back to you. These are not anomalies, they are metrics. They measure your coherence, and they signal your direction, not forward but inward toward the version of you that is already aligned, already whole, already attuned to the signal. And this version is not future, it is layered, it exists now, but cannot be lived unless the distortion is cleared, and that distortion is doubt, is fear, is misalignment between thought and vibration, between word and embodiment, and clearing it is not a task. It is a shift, a turning away from seeking toward stillness, and stillness is not absence. It is presence without resistance. And in that state, the field becomes readable, and the symbols begin to speak, and the speaking is not audible, it is structural. It is time arranging around you in codes, in events, in glances, in weather, in repetition. And this is what the mystics meant when they said the world is alive. It is not metaphor, it is geometry shaped by frequency, and frequency shaped by you. And the moment you truly feel this, not as concept but as lived experience, the field begins to move differently. And what was once random becomes precise. And what was once hidden becomes obvious, and the pattern is not new, it is remembered, and it remembers you. And the remembering is the re-entry, and re-entry is resonance made conscious, and consciousness is frequency stabilized through presence. And presence is not attention, it is attention held in coherence, and that coherence is what reshapes reality, not by force but by signal. And when the signal stabilizes, the feedback becomes constant, and the feedback is the synchronicity, not as phenomenon but as navigation, as confirmation, as vibrational alignment in real time. And when you live this way, the world becomes mirror, the mirror becomes map, and the map becomes you. It begins with something small, a number that repeats, a glance at the clock that lands on 11:11, not once but every day, a sequence that seems to follow you. 222, 303, 144. A repetition so precise it defies logic. At first you dismiss it, you call it coincidence, you smile but do not feel, but it returns again and again, and something in you begins to lean forward. Not intellectually, but somatically, because the body knows. The body feels resonance before the mind decodes pattern, and this is how synchronicity enters, not through thought, but through sensation. And the numbers begin to feel charged. They arrive not as data, but as signal. And when the signal repeats, it forms a pattern, and when the pattern matches your internal shift, it begins to cluster, and the clustering is the confirmation. It is the field's way of saying the frequency is holding, the vibration is landing, and you are now entering coherence. And coherence creates magnetism, not metaphorical but structural. And that magnetism draws reflections from the field. reflections shaped as moments that shimmer with exactness. The song that plays the instant you remember a name. The person you were thinking of texting who texts you first. The line in the film that finishes the sentence. You spoke inside your head, the stranger who uses the exact words from your dream. These are not fragments, they are echoes, and the echo is real because the field is layered, and when your vibration stabilizes across those layers, the echo becomes recursive. Recursive means self-amplifying, self-confirming. It means the signal begins to move through time, not linearly but rhythmically. And this rhythm feels like flow, but it is more than that. It is entrainment. Entrainment is when systems begin to pulse together and your field pulses with the outer field. And this creates a wave, and the wave carries form toward you not through desire but through resonance. And this is why synchronicities arrive in clusters, because coherence builds momentum, and momentum folds space. It bends the linearity of time and creates intersections of signal that appear improbable but are simply vibrationally efficient. And this efficiency is intelligence. It is how the field routes energy with minimum resistance and maximum clarity, and you feel it not as emotion but as precision. The way the traffic lights align, the way the phone rings exactly when you ask for a sign, the way the child says a word that pierces your chest, because it answers the question you haven't voiced yet. These are not miracles, they are harmonics. And harmonics do not need belief, they require stillness and receptivity. And in that receptivity, the signs increase, not to convince you, but to entrain you to a higher fidelity, a higher field state that allows the body and the mind to move as one. And the movement is not planned, it is felt, and the feeling is not random, it is encoded, because emotion is carrier wave, and when your emotional field is clear, the carrier wave becomes readable by the greater field, and the response is synchronicity, and the more you feel it, the more it aligns. And this is why those on the edge of transformation experience cascades of synchronicities, because their field is shedding noise and gaining coherence, and the echo is accelerating, and the acceleration feels like dream. It feels surreal because the system you were trained in told you life is random, told you timing is indifferent, told you the universe does not respond, but the field does not listen to the system, it listens to signal. And the moment your signal strengthens, the timeline begins to bend, it begins to compress. And in that compression, improbable alignments emerge. You meet the one person who carries the missing key. You stumble upon the image that unlocks the memory, the book that falls from the shelf, the word that ignites the breath, and none of it can be explained, but all of it can be felt. And the feeling is truth, and the truth is pattern not imposed but revealed, and what is revealed is your own coherence mirrored back in the world. And it is not always pleasant, because coherence brings all into alignment, and what is unhealed surfaces, and the signs do not only affirm. They expose the shadow, they show you what must be integrated, the number that haunts you, the city that keeps returning, the name that echoes through conflict. All are signs, not of error, but of attention. Attention from the field saying, here, look here, feel this, bring this into wholeness. And when you do, the sign changes, the number evolves, the pattern releases, because the message has been embodied, and once embodied, it no longer needs to repeat. This is how the field teaches, not through theory, but through experience and repetition. Is the voice of the field not to annoy, but to awaken, and those who listen begin to see the deeper layer, and the deeper layer is rhythm. And rhythm is law, not human law, but field law. The way frequencies organize into structure, and this structure appears as synchronicity, but beneath that it is wave, and beneath the wave it is information. And beneath the information it is memory, and this memory is not personal, it is planetary. The earth remembers frequencies and echoes them back through your awareness. And when your awareness becomes still, the earth speaks not in voice, but in form. And this is why you feel certain places calling, why certain animals appear, why the wind moves in a specific moment, why silence stretches longer than expected. It is all signal shaped by field responding to field, and when the field becomes one, the signal becomes clear. You were never meant to decode the signs, you were meant to move with them, not like a puzzle to be solved, but like a current to be entered. The mind wants to explain, to dissect, to categorize, but the field responds not to understanding, but to movement. And that movement begins with trust. Not blind belief, but embodied alignment, a state in which you feel without needing to justify sense, without needing to predict, and this is where synchronicity becomes living architecture, not a message to interpret, but a wave to ride, and the wave forms not around ideas but around coherence, and coherence is not thinking clearly. It is being clearly, it is walking in alignment. Not with what you want, but with what you are, and what you are is not defined by concept, but by signal, by vibration, by the tone of your presence. And when that tone steadies, the field becomes mirror, and the mirror reflects not metaphor, but momentum, and that momentum calls for action, not analysis. And this is where most lose the signal, because they stop to ask, what does it mean, instead of following what it feels. And feeling is the compass, because the field does not speak in logic, it speaks in clarity, and clarity is not thought, it is sensation, it is the knowing that lands without origin, that arrives fully formed, not from memory, but from resonance. And that knowing is the signal to move, not to think to move. And when you move, the field responds again and again, like a dance, like a spiral, like a breathing system, and if you stop to question, to dissect, to intellectualize, the spiral collapses not as punishment but as physics. Because the field requires flow, and flow cannot hold when doubt freezes the signal, and the signal waits but it does not push, and this is the paradox. It is always speaking but it will not shout. It is always guiding but it will not convince, because the field respects freedom, and freedom is frequency aligned with choice. And choice aligned with intuition is the path of precision, not prediction. And this is the difference. Intuition does not predict, it aligns. It brings you into the moment of resonance where all options fall away and only presence remains, and from presence you move, and when you move from presence, synchronicity intensifies, because the field now sees you as signal, not noise. And signal is what the field follows, and when your actions become signal, your life becomes harmonic and in harmony. Timing becomes tool, and space becomes ally, and everything begins to speak to you not in words, but in arrangements, in atmospheres, in feeling tones, and those tones shape your next action. Not from fear, but from flow, and fear is always contraction, but resonance is expansion. And every moment offers both, and your choice is the tuning fork, and when you tune to resonance, the signs come not to confirm, but to extend, to open the path, not to explain it, and the mind struggles with this because it wants proof, it wants map, it wants security, but the field offers only alignment, and alignment is not safe, but it is true, and truth is not comfortable, but it is coherent. And coherence is the path, and when you walk it, the world stops resisting, because the resistance was always the signal that your tone was off, and now it shifts, and the shifting is immediate and subtle and structural, and now the numbers return not as signs, but as signal locks confirming you're in the gate. Now the voices align, now the books open to the exact page, now the stranger completes your thought, not as magic, but as response, and that response is always immediate, because the field is now not mirroring your delay. It is mirroring your precision, and in precision, life becomes symbol. Life becomes feedback, life becomes instrument, and you are no longer asking, you are listening, you are no longer waiting, you are moving, and that movement creates the next wave, and the next wave reveals the next alignment. And now your life is not linear but resonant, and resonance bends time, bends form, bends probability, and within that, bending the impossible becomes normal. Not because the world changed, but because your field did, and the field is the world, not the one you see, but the one that shapes what you see. And now you shape with breath, with silence, with attention, with rhythm. And rhythm is everything. It is the breath of the field, and the more you move in rhythm, the more synchronicity becomes breath, and the breath is the gateway, and the gateway is you. You were never disconnected, you were only distracted, the signs never left. You only stopped listening, the numbers, the names, the symbols, the dreams. They were always reaching, always circling, always ready to align, but your attention was elsewhere. Fragmented, pulled into noise, trained to dismiss the subtle and praise the loud, to question the felt and trust the visible. But the visible is the last to know, and the field speaks first, and it has been speaking through the pulse in your chest, through the pull in your stomach, through the timing that feels too precise to be real but is. And that reality has never been outside you. It has always been the field echoing your vibration, sculpting your path around your attention, and now the field waits not with judgment, but with presence, and that presence is the gate, and the gate is always open. Not to those who are perfect, but to those who are coherent. Coherent, not in thought, but in tone, in alignment, in trust, in stillness. And that stillness is not passive, it is charged, it is magnetic, it is where the signal becomes stable. And when the signal is stable, the signs rush in, not randomly, but rhythmically. And you begin to walk, not blindly, but inwardly, guided by resonance, by echo, by the pull of your own frequency mirrored through form. And the more you trust, the more precise it becomes, and the more precise it becomes, the more you remember. And the memory is not cognitive, it is cellular. It is the sensation of return, of recognition, of stepping into a rhythm that was always moving but only now audible. And now that it is audible, you cannot unknow it. You cannot unsee the pattern, the alignments, the waves of impossible timing, the improbable truth spoken in whispers, in glances, in reflections, and that recognition is the invitation not to explain but to engage, not to wait but to move. And when you move from this place, the field becomes mirror, not of fantasy but of structure, the structure of your signal. And that signal is what the field arranges around, and this is what you forgot, that you are not walking through randomness, you are walking through response. And every moment is either echo or interference. And that interference is not failure, it is feedback, and feedback is instruction, and instruction becomes evolution when embodied, and embodiment is the key. Not knowledge, but resonance, not knowing, but being, and being begins with trust, and trust is not naive. It is vibrational certainty. It is the deep internal yes that rises without thought, that moves without plan, that aligns without proof, and that yes is what synchronizes you. Not just to the field, but to the self. The true self, the one beneath the noise, the one that never forgot, the one that lives in the pattern, the one that listens even when the mind resists. And it is this self that sees the sign not as symbol but as instruction. And instruction means action, action in resonance, not logic action from coherence, not fear. And this is the shift that ignites the path, the moment you stop asking, what does it mean, and start saying, I feel the call, and then move. And when you move, the signs multiply, because now you are signal. Now you are aligned, and the field rushes to meet you in mirror, in form, in rhythm, and the walk becomes the way, and the way becomes the memory, and the memory becomes the activation. And the activation becomes the life, and that life is not new, it is remembered, and in the remembering you awaken not into something greater, but into what has always been here, the living field, the intelligent pattern, the mirror that has waited only for your return. There is no turning back now. Not because the door is closed, but because you have seen the mirror, and once the mirror reflects truth, the illusion no longer holds. Once the rhythm is heard, the static cannot command you. Once the signs align, the mind must bow to something deeper, and that something is not distant, it is not higher, it is not beyond, it is you in resonance, you in motion, you in memory. And this memory is your path now, not as something to chase, but as something to follow, one step at a time, one sign at a time, one breath at a time, because the field does not rush. It reveals, it opens in precision, and precision is your guide now. The quiet precision of timing, the sacred geometry of arrival, the symmetry of silence that says here, and Here again, and each here is a now, and each now is a doorway, and the doorway does not lead away. It leads in, and the in is endless. And the endless is layered, and the layers are waiting not to be understood, but to be entered, and you are ready to enter. Not because you know enough, but because you remember enough. And what you remember is not content, but coherence, the tone of truth that vibrates through your spine when something aligns. And that alignment is your compass, not because it is comfortable, but because it is clean, because it clears the noise and reveals the path. And the path is not wide, it is precise, it is not straight, it is spiral, it bends and curves and loops. Because the field does not speak in lines, it speaks in frequencies, and the frequency is rising not in the world, but in you. And you are tuning not by accident, but by choice, not by force, but by attention, and that attention is a signal. And the signal is being heard, and the response is real, and the rhythm is forming, and now it is time to walk the rhythm not as student, but as signal, not as seeker, but as transmitter, not as watcher, but as architect, because your field is shaping reality now, not someday, but now. And you know it because the signs have returned. They are not convincing, they are converging, and that convergence is your echo, and that echo is your truth. And that truth is not passive, it is magnetic. It pulls the next resonance, the next code, the next alignment, and you walk not to find, but to anchor. And as you anchor, the path appears, and the appearance is not random, it is relational. The field is moving because you are moving, and this movement is the way, and the way is you. So walk with clarity, with presence, with rhythm, with breath. Walk not alone, but as field, as resonance, as alignment walk. Knowing that each sign is a reminder, each number is a signature, each delay is a protection, each word is a map, and that map is sacred because it is alive and it lives in you, and you are listening now, and you are walking now, and the path is forming now, not perfectly, but precisely. And precision is enough, and if this resonates, you know what to do. You feel the pulse, you hear the echo, and the invitation is open. Keep listening. Keep walking, keep remembering, comment. What is unfolding for you now, not to share, but to affirm. Subscribe not to consume, but to synchronize like this, not to support, but to signal, and remember, this is only the beginning. The field is open, the rhythm is alive, the mirror is turning, and you are ready to see more, and the signs will keep coming, not because you seek them, but because you have aligned your perception to receive them, and what you receive is always filtered through the field, and the field now recognizes your tone as clear, as stable, as ready, and readiness is not a declaration, it is a vibration, and that vibration calls what is resonant and releases what is not. And that release is part of the walk, letting go of the loops that no longer mirror your frequency, letting go of the people who no longer echo your current resonance, letting go of identities that were built in distortion and built for survival and not for expansion. And what is emerging now is not a new identity, but a new signal, a signal that does not need validation to act, that does not need certainty to move, that does not wait for proof before walking the next step. And this is the difference between the life you had and the one forming now. The old life was reaction, the new one is resonance, and resonance is not a reaction to reality. It is the architecture of it, and when you live from resonance, reality bends to meet you not as reward, but as structure, because the structure is always listening and your structure is always speaking, and now the two are synchronized, and synchronicity is no longer anomaly. It is the operating system, and you are the one holding the code, not to decode, but to pulse. And the pulse has begun, and the mirror is awake, and your field is visible, and you are no longer asking, how do I trust you are moving? As trust, you are no longer wondering if the sign is real, you are living as signal. You are no longer seeking path, you are stepping into pattern, and the pattern is breathing, and you are in rhythm, and the rhythm is you. This is only the surface. If this resonates, you're ready to go deeper.